Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first session for this year's Retire Japan Online Conference. This basically is going to be everything about personal finance in Japan, pretty much. It's basically all the kind of concepts you might want to think about. For many people, this is going to be basic. That's why it's 101. But hopefully you'll find it interesting. I'm going to go very quickly. I think I have 120 slides and 30 minutes. So that's probably like 10, 15 seconds per slide. Don't worry, there'll be a recording to look at later if you want to look back at stuff. And yeah, let's get started. So first thing, we can probably skip this, thankfully. You can go and have a coffee and then come back for the other speakers because basically you could read a couple of books. These ones were a big influence on me, especially Your Money or Your Life. That really changed the way I thought about money. And Millionaire Teacher is very, very good about the basic kind of concepts of investing. So these two books are excellent. There's more on the Retire Japan site if you want more, but just read these two first and you'll be good. So I think most people probably have a view of personal finance as being kind of dull and boring and involving spreadsheets. And it can, if you're into that kind of thing, you can certainly dive deep into the numbers and get your Excel files out, but it doesn't have to. And actually, I think it's probably more like, for me, personal finance is more like kind of a superpower, right? So if you're good at personal finance, life's easy. Like if you think about it in terms of video games, if you're bad with money, then you've bumped up the difficulty level to like God mode, right? Or hell mode. But if you're good with money, life is much easier. And I think everyone probably has some things that they can do to level up financially. I still do. I've got lots of things I need to work on. But I think everyone can do it. And it's not an all or nothing thing either. There's lots of small steps we can take to just make life easier and better and more fulfilling. Maybe you're like me. So I came to Japan 21 years ago on the JET program, and I wasn't intending to stay, but I ended up staying. So I've kind of fallen into a Japan life here. My family, not particularly wealthy, and we certainly didn't talk about money very much. So I didn't have much of a background or any role models growing up. I think this probably set me back a little bit. So why me? Why are we here today? Basically, I started Retire Japan because of a conversation with a friend. So a friend of mine was working in Tokyo, and he was telling me about his retirement plans and his pension kind of planning that he'd done through a company in Tokyo. One of these companies that deals with largely English-speaking expats here in Japan. And just talking to him, I got so angry that I went home and started Retire Japan that very day. That night, I registered the domain and got started on the website because it really annoyed me that my friend was being taken advantage of in that way. And I wanted to help people who maybe didn't have the knowledge or didn't have the language skills to really figure out personal finance here in Japan, which is why Retire Japan is one of the only English language sources, I think, for information about personal finance here and investing and things like that. So for me, I had a few important experiences. I received an inheritance. But when I got this, I wasn't good with money. I didn't really understand personal finance. I didn't have good habits. So I basically wasted most of it. And I think this is very common. Basically, if your money habits are not good, then adding more money to the mix isn't going to help you. And often it's going to make it worse. So this really taught me a lesson in that once, you know, the inheritance was mostly gone, I kind of sat back and thought, wait, that wasn't that wasn't ideal. I need to get better at this. And that was one kind of push that pushed me into thinking about money and reading about money and learning about money. I also lost my job in 2008. I was working on a 1-year contract. And when I was hired, I was told, you know, you can do this job for as long as you like. And 4 years later, I was told, actually, we don't need this position anymore. So I lost my job at short notice. My wife was really upset and shocked, understandably, and we didn't really know what we were going to do money-wise. You know, we had rents, we had kids' school fees, and, you know, I had 3 months worth of paychecks left. And at that point, we didn't really have much of a financial cushion either. Luckily, I had some friends who hooked me up with university teaching part-time and teaching eIDECO part-time and so on. We got through that hump, but I kind of made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to be in this situation again, where someone else can make a decision and kind of wreck my life financially. I kind of took responsibility for that. I thought, this is my fault. You know, I was in a weak situation. I don't want to be in that weak position again. We also had this thing in 2011. I was actually in this building waiting for some students at that time. Luckily, the students weren't here. And that was a very, it was a great learning experience, I think, for us. I was going to say interesting, but interesting sounds a bit callous given the immensity of what happened. But we certainly learned a lot. For us, we ended up evacuating to Kanazawa across the mountains because we got some phone calls from Europe saying, hey, watch out for the nuclear power plants. And I made the decision very, very quickly that we should leave and go and stay with relatives in Kanazawa. So we did that for about a month and then came back to Sendai afterwards. But that was a really big experience because we basically left everything behind, you know, apart from a suitcase. And we didn't know if we were going to come back. And I found I didn't really mind all that much. All this stuff that we had in our house really didn't seem particularly important at that time. And that was another kind of aha kind of moment for me. And yeah, the nuclear thing as well, like not fun. Right, and so we started Retire Japan, and Retire Japan has grown and thrived mainly through the community, I think. So there's a great community around Retire Japan, the forum, and people just reading and commenting online. And this for me is by far the best aspect of it, the community of kind of like-minded people who are friendly and help each other. So today, in the following 20 some minutes, I'm going to try to inspire you a little bit, maybe provide you with some new options and a little bit of information, not much information. We're not going to have time for that. But what I recommend is if you hear something in this talk that seems promising, make a note of it and then, you know, ask a question at the end, or maybe come on the forum and ask a question about it there as well. All right, so it was going to be 30 minutes, but we've got about 20 some left. I'll take questions at the end and we're going to talk about these things. So personal finance. I think the three big dangers with personal finance are doing nothing, doing the wrong thing, and getting ripped off. But the worst one's doing nothing, because if you do nothing, then you are not going to make progress. You're not going to build things, you know. And if you're not working on your financial situation, that puts you at more risk, I think, of accidents and unforeseen problems and so on. Now, doing the wrong thing, this isn't great because, you know, often if you do the wrong thing, you'll regret it and change your mind later. But it's a learning process. Like everyone who gets started with investing or personal finance, they're going to make mistakes along the way, and that's fine. That's part of the process. The mistakes make you stronger. So getting started and making some small mistakes, I think, is very good. Now, the key is to make sure that they're small mistakes. They're not big ones where you incur a substantial loss. So you start small steps, and if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. You correct and carry on. Getting ripped off, depending on how badly, this can still be a learning experience. It can still be a good thing. My friend with the really suboptimal pension plan through the investment firm in Tokyo, he was still better off than if he'd done nothing, right? He was still saving money. He was growing his money, but even if it was a lot slower than it would have been otherwise. Basically, I think everyone knows what to do with personal finance. It's a lot like weight loss or health. Everyone knows what you need to do. You need to drink water and maybe cut down on carbs and stop eating like sugary snacks and, walking more. But it's doing it that's the difficult thing, right? It's building these habits over time. This is basically it, isn't it? So don't spend more money than you have. Super easy kind of concept. Same thing here. This is slightly more nuanced. So spend less than you earn, invest the difference, and don't get into debt. And this will provide you with a very sustainable, a very comfortable, and a very safe lifestyle, I think. So basically, you can pretty much have anything, but probably not everything. And much like me prior to 2008 or so, most people don't know what's possible with personal finance. But it's quite easy to create a virtuous circle of wealth where you start investing, you have more money, you invest more, you learn more about investing, you get better at it, you have even more money, and the money kind of turns into a flywheel that supports your lifestyle and then actually pays for your lifestyle. The first step is probably figuring out where you are to start with. How much are you making? How much are you spending? How much are you saving and investing, right? This sounds super easy, but a lot of people can't tell you this. If I grabbed you right now and said, okay, tell me about your financial situation, could you do it without looking stuff up? And if you couldn't, then maybe you don't know where you are. This is always fun. So really quickly, just have a quick think. How much money stuff do you own right now? Net of debt and so on. And then think about how much money you've earned in your life and compare the two. And if you're normal, then you will cry because your assets right now are a tiny proportion of the money you've earned in your life. I'm a big fan of The Matrix. My wife always makes fun of me about this. And so I wrote this 7 stages to financial independence. Now, a lot of people don't need to get to financial independence, but it's a very comfortable state to be in if you can. And these are the kind of steps on the way, I think. So, level 0, normal person that doesn't really think about money very much. 1, you wake up, you notice that you're in the matrix, or you notice that maybe you've got some lessons to learn. Step 2, you start building basic habits like saving some money every month, maybe having an emergency fund. Step 3, you get to financial stability. This is where you have savings. So you have an emergency fund and you've started saving for the future. And you've got maybe a couple of years of spending saved and invested. And this is huge because it means that, if you lose your job, you could actually just live off your savings for a year or 2 while looking for a new job. And there's no panic and there's no trying to get loans from people. And just it makes things a lot smoother. And then after that, a lot of people find that, they actually enjoy this and they find it useful and it's making a huge difference to their life. So they accelerate and then they get to financial strength, I think, which is, you've got 10 years of spending in the bank. So you can overcome pretty much any kind of financial obstacle. And then after that, you're financially independent. You don't really need to work for money anymore, etc. There are only three real big areas here. There's spending, there's earning, and there's investing. And these are the three kind of ones that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. If you concentrate on these areas, you'll level up your life. So earning, it's basically earn as much as you can through any way you can. It's useful to think about income streams. I've really found this in my life that it's really useful to diversify your income. So you've got a job, but you also, publish sci-fi novels on the side, and you invest, so you get money from that as well. And it's safer to have different sources of income. This book's really interesting. The author's gone a bit off the rails now, so don't go to his forum right now. But the book's really good, even though it's a bit cheesy. But it's a really good way of thinking about entrepreneurship if that's something you're interested in. And then we've got spending, and the key to spending is basically to spend mindfully, which means you spend money on things that make you happy, that improve your life, and you don't spend money on things that don't. And that seems super obvious, but most people spend lots of money on things that don't make them happy. And once you figure out the difference, it really changes your life. The easiest way to optimize your spending is to focus on the really big spending first, like housing, transport, insurance, mobile phones. I'm just switching to a cheap mobile phone carrier can save you 5,000 yen a month. And that's the start of your emergency fund if you're unable to save otherwise. Basically, the more you save, the quicker you'll get to financial independence. So this graph says everything. If you can save 80% of your income, you can retire in 2 years' time. It's a bit simplistic, and not many people can do that, but it's the principle of the thing. The more you save, the quicker these things are going to go. Savings rate is more important than income. So if you compare these two people, Carla is saving more, but Mike has a lot more flexibility in his life, and he's going to end up financially independent sooner because his lifestyle is much less expensive. Basically, people get used to stuff. So there's all sorts of research that show that people that win the lottery, their base level of happiness is back to normal after a few months. If you buy a car, the first time you drive it, you're like, wow, my new car's great. But 2 months later, it's just your car. It's not exciting. It doesn't make you any happier anymore. And the same the other way. So, people who have accidents and lose a limb, or, they end up with the same base level of happiness after a while, once they get used to it. So this is a great blog, especially if you go back and read the earlier posts. Just about thinking about money and thinking about lifestyle and so on. The key habit is saving and investing. So saving money every month and hopefully investing it in things that are likely to grow over time. You want an emergency fund because emergencies happen. And then if an emergency happens, you don't want to have to borrow money, and you don't want to have to sell your investments at the wrong time. So having some cash in hand is a very good idea. Saving for something is fine, but a lot of people think this is what saving is. Saving for a holiday, saving for a car, saving for a house. It is, but I call that deferred spending rather than saving. Saving ideally is for the long term, for the future, and to build your kind of financial foundation. And to do that, you have to not spend it. What's the ideal saving rate? It's going to depend. Something you want to save something. I think everyone needs to save at least 10-20% of their income if possible. 30% seems like a nice medium. It's a high saving rate. It's higher than normally, higher than most normal people, but it's not insane either. The last few years I've been saving 50-60% of my income. That's insane, right? Most people think that's ridiculous, but the higher you can get this, the faster you're going to reach your goals and so on. We basically want to invest to avoid inflation. and to have our money grow over time. I meet a lot of people who say, I can't do this right now. I've got kids, I've got a mortgage, maybe later. That's probably the wrong way to look at it, I think. You want to get started now, even if it's a small amount of money, because that way you make your mistakes now, you learn now, and you start building a habit now. If you put it off until later, you're not going to get started. This is important. This is like having your head on fire. It should be a priority for most people, I think. This is a very underrated Disney film as well. It's from Hercules. So these books I really recommend. This will change your thinking about money. This will basically give you the basics of investing. And this has a lot more detail about investing. I love this quote. This is so true, basically. So it's all about spending or not spending, and what you spend on as well. So my financial goals. So I wanted to not be vulnerable financially, so I could deal with accidents, problems, and things that come up. And I think we're in that position now. And it really does make life easier. So you don't have arguments about money with your family, because money's not really a problem anymore. I want the freedom to do whatever I want, which basically means being able to, work when I want to, or go where I want to, and so on. And I want it to be work optional. And the last two I'm getting closer to. I'm not quite there yet. Investing. So investing seems scary to most people. I think there's three things that people tend to get wrong about this. The main one is they think it's like gambling, where investing is random, and some people will be very lucky and make money, and some people will be unlucky and lose money. And I don't think that's the case. They think it's difficult because they see things like this. This is actually something that some people use to invest. I have no idea how it works, and you don't need to. So you don't need to do these screens and charts and data and stuff. And I think it's time consuming. And while it can be, if you want to day trade stocks, the best investing is not time consuming. So the purpose of investing is not to get rich. So you don't get rich through investing. You get rich by earning and not spending all your money. What investing does is it allows you to keep the value of your money and to grow your money slowly over time. So this is the question where, where would you get advice about investing? And basically all of these are bad options, right? A bank is going to try and sell you products that make them money. A paid financial advisor is okay. This is someone that you're paying for advice, but you have to be able to tell whether they're giving you good advice or not. So you do need a base level of knowledge anyway. And the last one is very dangerous, because financial advisors that don't charge fees basically make their money from commissions, and commissions are paid by products that are too expensive, basically. So the only really good option is D, learn about it yourself. These are the things you can control with investing. So your asset allocation. So what kind of things you buy. Your diversification, how many different investments you have, and your costs. So paying low fees. And you can control these. These are the most important things. You can't control things like, is there a stock market crash or whatever. So you don't worry about those. You worry about the things that you can control. Asset allocation is basically choosing broadly what to invest in. So you might be investing in stocks, and I generally recommend investing in global stocks. So you're buying the whole world without worrying about which country is going to do better or worse. Diversification is having lots of different investments. So you don't just buy one company. Like my wife's cousin, who worked for JAL and had all their money in JAL stock, and then JAL went bankrupt, so their stocks went to zero and he lost his job. So yeah, don't do that. Make sure that you are diversified when you invest. Fees, costs are very, very important. So you want to minimize these. In Japan, for mutual funds, Decent fees are under 0.2%. You don't want to be paying much more than that without a good reason. These are the main asset types, so we've got stocks, which are small pieces of companies. And there's two reasons to buy stocks. One is because you think the company is going to do well, so the stock will go up in price in the future. And the other is that some companies pay a dividend, so they give some of their profits to their shareholders. And those are the two main reasons to own stocks. Bonds are basically loans, right? So you lend your money to people, whether that's a government or a company. And the idea between bonds is that they're more stable than stocks. So if you have stocks and bonds, you have a nice diversified portfolio. Millionaire teaches very good about explaining this. And real estate, we've got 2 real estate sessions today. So I'm not going to really talk about that much more. Basically, when you buy stocks or bonds or real estate, generally, I think it's better to buy index funds, which is basically investments that collect a great number of stocks or bonds or real estate together, and then you can buy a piece of that. So instead of buying one company, you buy thousands all at the same time. It's much safer, it's more diversified, and you pay lower fees. So these websites are great for information. Retire Japan, the Bogleheads Forum, JL Collins. And actually, I want to add one, which is recently on Reddit. There's a community called Japan Finance. And that is a really, really good place to ask tax questions and questions, especially for Americans. There's a lot of Americans on there. So that is a great resource as well. Just to compare amateur and professional investors. So professionals have all these things that you don't have, like training and information, and but what they're doing is different to what you're doing. So a professional has to justify their results in the short term. They have to impress their clients, but you don't have to do that. You can just sit back, relax, and slowly over time make money. So generally speaking, the professional is going to win at active investing. So if you try to invest actively by buying and selling stocks, you're basically competing with these people. And that's a very stacked deck against you. However, as an amateur, you can just sit back and leave your money to grow over the long term. And that's probably going to do better than the professional approach would. So basically, you don't have to beat the market. You can just sit back and do nothing. This is, I don't know if this is true. It seems almost too good to be true. But basically, people that had forgotten their login password or who had died tended to have the best investing results at Fidelity. Which kind of makes sense. They weren't playing with their accounts and buying and selling things and panicking and so on. This is a great book if you want to get a bit deeper on why investing works. Right, quick thing about Japan, because we are slightly over time. So the problem in Japan is that everything's in Japanese. You can't get a broker account in English in Japan. You have to sign up in Japanese, read the terms and conditions and so on. Also, in Japan, investing has a terrible image, I think probably because of the bubble and also because of scams that target investors. I really like this TV show. It's called Yamikin Ushijima-kun. It's about a loan shark and his wacky adventures in the Japanese underworld. But every other episode is about some kind of investment scam where greedy people lose their money to these kinds of criminals. And that's the image of investing in Japan until recently. Okay, Americans. So basically Americans, the US tax laws make it very difficult to do anything in Japan in terms of investing. So, obviously you need to submit tax returns. You have this income exclusion thing, but you're not really allowed to use foreign domiciled funds, mutual funds especially. So you can't do much in Japan. It's very difficult. So this is a useful organization to join. This is a lobby group that's trying to get rid of some of these tax laws that penalize expats. But generally for Americans, you want to invest in the US, you know, through your existing accounts or through interactive brokers. Okay, iDeCo in Japan is good for pretty much everyone except Americans. This is a way to invest and reduce your income tax at the same time. It's a great deal. You should look into it. You can save money on your taxes. And it's basically a self-directed pension. So you're choosing investments within this special kind of account, and you basically can't access the money until you retire. This is a great book if you can read Japanese, or if you want to give it to a family member who can read Japanese. Basically, this journalist, Takegawa Minako, is wonderful. I love her stuff. It's very simple, it's clear, it's easy to read. Very much recommended. NISA is another type of investing account. In a NISA account, you can basically buy things and you don't pay tax on the profits. So it doesn't reduce your income tax, but it does mean you don't have to pay 20% tax on any gains or dividends and so on. There's different types of NISA, but they're all a good idea. So it's better to invest in NISA than to invest in a taxable account. So you want to fill your NISA account first and then invest in a normal broker account. Again, Takegawa Minako has a book and it's pretty good. Recently, we've been seeing a lot of adverts on TV for Wealth Navi. You've probably seen them. They're kind of irritating adverts. They're a robo-advisor. My take on robo-advisors in Japan is that they're too expensive. The fees they charge are too high, but it's better to use a robo-advisor than to do nothing. So if you weren't going to invest otherwise, this is a perfectly fine option. If you're willing to do a little bit of work and learn a little bit, you can do the same thing for 1/10 of the fee. Overseas issues, super quick. So if you have worldwide income that you don't bring to Japan, my understanding is you don't need to declare that to the tax office here for the first 5 years you're resident. And the last few years, OECD countries have been sharing account information and so on. So it's a lot harder to evade taxes now. Also, if you have overseas assets, doesn't matter if they produce income or not, over 50 million yen, you have to declare them. And this is quite a serious thing if you don't do this. You don't have to pay any tax, you just have to tell the tax office these things exist. The exit tax has started, I think it kicked in recently. Basically, if you have over 100 million yen's worth of stock or things like stocks that have capital gains, when you leave Japan, you have to pay capital gains on them, even if you don't sell them. It's a pretty crappy tax, I think. It's not been very well thought out, but it does exist, so be aware. This is a big one. So if you're on a working visa for the first 10 years, you don't have to pay gift tax or inheritance tax on overseas inheritances. If you have a spouse visa or you're a permanent resident, or you've been working here for more than 10 years, you do have to pay tax on these things. So again, be aware. Nenkin, join Nenkin because it's the law and you'll probably want to have a pension in old age. If you want to learn more about your Nenkin status, you can check it online. You can go to the Nenkin website, log in and see your account. And if you're going to die in Japan, it's a good idea to have a will, or at least to figure out what's going to happen with your stuff. Right, super quick 10 steps, and then we'll finish and do a little bit of QA. So step one is, wake up. It's like the alcoholics thing, right? Realize you have a problem. Step one is figure out what your money situation is. 2, try to spend more effectively, more mindfully. Step 3, try to increase your income somehow, maybe change jobs, get a new job, get a second job. 4, pay off any debt you have, especially high interest debt. I think a mortgage where you're paying 0.8%, fine, not an issue at all. But if you've got credit card debt, 10%, 15%, get rid of that. Save up your emergency fund, which is enough to help you deal with problems, which is going to be different for different people. Start investing, max out your iDeCo accounts. Max out your NISA account. Invest even more in a taxable account or in other things. And then retire, figure out your pension, figure out how you're going to spend down your investments, which is different from accumulating them. And then finally, I think this is super important, pay it forward, help other people, because this will make you happy, basically, whether it's your family, whether it's giving money to charity, and so on. All right, so please check Retire Japan for any questions. Go to the forum. I do have a coaching service if you really want it, but you don't need to have coaching, right? You can just find the information yourself and do it that way. Okay, so we're going to do 10 minutes of questions here. And we're also going to have the extended Q&A session later as well. So if you don't manage to ask your question here, you can ask it there. If you're watching this later on YouTube, please ask questions in the comments or on the blog post comments, and I'll be happy to answer them there as well. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording now.
Ben, I've been collecting a few questions that we've had in the chat, so I was thinking I could read those out. And you
Fantastic.
That'd be okay?
Yeah, I'm just going to stop the recording if I can figure out where that is.